Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Master Sergeant Dakota Belcher, AFWERX Western Region Spark Cell Coordinator and Tesseract LNO. Here with Major Freitag for the Tesseract Fireside chat this morning. So let's go ahead and get started. So Major Freitag, do you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself? Like where you're from, just a little bit about like what your roles and responsibilities are in the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dakota. I appreciate it. Yeah, Major Sean Freitag. To me, just real quick, one thing about me, I'm just a regular airman trying to have a positive influence for those who serve and anyone who wants to improve, right? My current role right now, 19th Maintenance Squadron Commander. I'm an aircraft maintenance officer by trade. So I'm right now responsible for all the back shop maintenance for 55 C-130 aircraft here at Little Rock Air Force Base, home of Herc Nation. Let's go. And I'm grateful to lead about 500 people in my squadron, which supports 4 different MAGCOMs, all their C-130s. Really just love being a part of the team I'm on, have an amazing leadership team, and just feel so supported in the work I get to do here as a commander. Responsibilities of a commander, really, it's like, what does it come down to? It's like, I am entrusted with the authority to lead our most important resource, right? Our airmen, and to execute our mission. And I think that comes in a lot of forms. Sometimes it's being the chief inspiration officer. Sometimes it's being the standards police, right? But without a doubt, I can tell you, for anyone who's been a squadron commander, it is the best job in the Air Force. So I think from day one as a maintenance officer, you kind of get told like, hey, the goal for you one day is to be a squadron commander, right? And so like when you're a young lieutenant, you sit at a table, maybe you do a briefing, but you see your career down the table from you. So you might start in the back wall at the end of the table, and you see these people down the table, whether it's the officer in charge, a flight commander, OPSO, you see a squadron commander, you're like, wow, I'll never be that. So it's kind of wild to flash forward now and be that role. But how I got here, so started off at fighters and test at Eglin, Air Force Base, Florida, which is awesome. Did red AMU, blue AMU, and then was an exec for a little bit. I went to Moody Air Force Base and did attack and rescue there. So I did A-10s and then also the C-130s and HH-60s there, which was incredible. From there, got picked up to go work at Air Force Personnel Center, which was extremely unique situation being a maintainer in a personnel world. I went to Andrews Air Force Base, did a couple of years as a operations officer up there in 89. Went to Maxwell for a year, Air Command Staff College, and now I'm a squadron commander at Little Rock. Got picked up to be here and just loving it so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a really fun career so far for you. So, um, what current innovation efforts are you leading? Like, I guess, what are the objectives that you're trying to achieve within that innovation effort?
So as far as like, there's a couple of key experiences to me, like actual tactical stuff that I think is really important into how we got to this place. So first and foremost, learning about how difficult a maintainer's job is, to me, is like absolutely critical to this journey. You think about the conditions that they're in, the fact that they're under resourced a lot of times. Every unit you'll ever be a part of is a no fail mission, right? And ultimately the cost of mistakes are so high. You make a mistake on a flight line or a back shop, people's lives are at line. They're on the line. It could cost someone their life. As a young lieutenant, I was very fortunate and I got to learn from some great mechanics like Staff Sergeant Ben Matthew Hansen, crew chiefs like Senior Airman Leah Curtin, Jason Olaraza, and Staff Sergeant Matthew Bias. And also now as a squadron commander, my experiences are different, right? So as a lieutenant, I could spend time on a flight line in the cold at night, understanding the struggles, how to change an engine, things like that, and some of the resource constraints. Now as a squadron commander, it's different, right? People always want to show me their good side. And it's hard because I really want to see the reality that my airmen in the 19th Maintenance Squadron face. And so, I'm learning from a different point of view of how can I accurately capture their job and the experience that they're having. And then that ties into the second thing I'm seeing, which I've always felt like airmen's voices often weren't being heard. And a lot of this can come from what people refer to as the frozen middle, right? And it can be filters, can filter the info to kind of render it what people believe is ineffective. From long flight line days and nights, like you'll see that if a message or a problem goes through all these different layers of leadership, then is the real problem being communicated effectively through the leaders of this organization? And I just didn't think it was, right? I had similar experiences at AFPC, and not from the leadership team. They were phenomenal. They empowered us. But a lot of times officers from the maintenance community doing assignments, like they would tell us things about like our voices aren't being heard here, right? And so that was always telling. Now I'm seeing that from the officer side. And then I get put in charge of talent marketplace development for total force. It went from officer to total force when I was there. So you take 40, 50,000 users, bump that up to 400 plus thousand users. And I'm the single person for the Air Force that takes those requirements through the contractor of what to build. And so I had to change the optic of worrying about just officer force to the users of the total force, right? And it a lot of times just felt like airmen's voices weren't being heard effectively. So those experiences highlighted a trend to me. And it was that oftentimes problems and perspectives aren't either getting they're not getting they're not getting to decision authorities at the speed of relevance. And so it made me think like, what is the best way that we can possibly give our airmen a direct line to those responsible for those organization, like the climate and culture, to make a positive change? And so I wanted to highlight that because I feel like those experiences, you know, throughout the career have kind of come to fruition as we talk about the innovative things that we're doing now.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, right? Because we see it more and more in the innovation space where airmen are willing to take risk, right? They're willing to try to challenge some things a little bit differently. And I mean, I've always operated off of the premise of don't accept a no from somebody who doesn't have the authority to say yes. So like, what? Okay, I value your input. Thank you very much. Now, like, who do I actually need to talk to? No offense, right? But who do I actually need to talk to now in order to get this over the finish line? Because maybe they see the value in it, right? And I think that's really awesome because we, quite frankly, need more people to challenge the status quo to really try to understand what is better for the Air Force, from the tactical level airmen to all the way up to the strategic level. That's really awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're doing all of that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So then I guess, were there any other like challenges or roadblocks that you experienced with like working at AFPC or in your innovation journey? Like something significant, I guess.
So in my journey specifically, not related to the project, the health of force stuff, which we'll get into, but in my journey, uh, I think that there were just enough times where I failed doing something or getting something across a line where I say failed, right? Like failure. I've changed my lexicon of like how I look at failure now. I either think you win or you learn. Like that's it. There's no I don't believe in failure anymore. And so I think that there were so many points where like I was able to get something small across the line, or I would get something to the starting line, but not to the finish line. Because to your point earlier, I didn't maybe know who the right authority was, or I didn't communicate effectively enough in a way to have them see the need, take action in the time that's required, right? So, um, I we probably don't have enough time to go over the specifics. I have plenty of every other Thursday we do a fail forward Thursday in my squadron, and I tell all my officers and senior NCOs stories of failure from the past, from different levels for me, so that hopefully they can learn from those experiences, right? To make sure that they can take something away from it to avoid mistakes that I made previously, to either win or learn.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? Because uh, in an organization such as the Air Force, where we have like quantifiable metrics that define what success is, right? We the failures are then not defined by those quantifiable metrics. So then, like, what is the ROI? I like to use a term called LFI, learning from investment, not return on investment. So, like, what can we incorporate, right? That then spreads this knowledge everywhere so people don't have to go through that same pain that I've felt, right? How can I alleviate that pain so I just don't have to watch other people struggle the same way that I did. So like those, I think that's really impactful and powerful is allowing other individuals to learn from mistakes, right? Quotes mistakes, because I don't consider those mistakes. Um, those are just opportunities is all it is. And I think that's really awesome. Um, cool. So then, do you mind talking to us like a little bit about like what the health of the force initiative is?
Yeah.
And like where you're kind of going with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So for scope and context, you're going to hear me say help the force metrics, and you're going to hear me say foundations. I'm probably going to use them interchangeably. They're going to link up at some points. If it's confusing, I apologize. I should do a better job, but I'm going to try to talk through them quite a bit, right? And so to me, ultimately what this gets at is airmen are our greatest resource, right? How many leaders do we have to hear say airmen are our greatest resource, right? We are powered by innovation. Like, we're powered by airmen, fueled by innovation, right? All these great things. I love these catchphrases. They're awesome. I think they're great. I think the leaders mean it. My question though is if airmen are the engine that powers the world's greatest air force, where's our check engine light? Right? What do we have? You talked about metrics earlier, right? And this is like, this gets after, as a maintenance officer, we get we get trained thoroughly on metrics and health of the fleet. And we talk about training metrics. Like everything we do is about metrics, except for our people, right? Yes, we'll talk about status of training and things like that, but like, how are our people doing to create a culture to move the organization forward? So let's kind of start tying this in, right? So let's kind of walk through a problem. And the problem is going to come from two different perspectives. So picture this scenario from 2 points of view. First one is a maintenance airman doing your job, whether it's a flight line or back shop, doesn't matter, right? So from your pushing a toolbox, you're out there doing your job, you see what you perceive as a problem, right? And maybe it's uncertain, maybe you're not 100% confident. And you get told, what do you do when you see a problem? Well, I tell my supervisor, right? Okay, supervisor's off shift. Oh, okay. I'm gonna tell the expediter. Well, unfortunately, that expediter is not approachable. So what is the action that's taken by that airman? I'm probably gonna say nothing. Maybe I'll talk about it with my peers, but I'm not gonna bring it up to get solved. So I'm taking that work stress and frustration and problems. Maybe I'm taking those problems home, you know? Or ultimately the worst part is there's a potential problem that still exists in the work center. So the next shift that comes in, if it's not in turnover, they might encounter that same problem. And now do we damage one of our most important resources, our people? Do we damage our airplanes? Like that's a problem, right? So you have this situation as an airman. Now it's changed the optic, and now I'm a command team, right? So now I went from that lieutenant just pushing a toolbox. Now I'm a commander or command team. I'm an SEL, and I'm trying to best understand and identify and ultimately solve my unit's problems. Right? I have nearly 500 people in my squadron. Is it realistic for me to be able to get the opportunity to hear 500 points of view every day of those problems? And if so, how do you do it effectively? And I think in our current state, that is unrealistic, right? I don't have the time of the day to be able to do that. Everyone's most important resource in life is time. And so what do I do in the airman situation above? How do I solve that as a commander? I want to solve their problems, but I got to know about it, right? So the proposed solution ultimately is health of force metrics. This is not something new, something that's been around in discussion for a long time, right? But what health of force metrics can do is going to give all the users a quick and easy to use tools to listen, understand, and act at the speed of relevance, right? It's going to give the airman a direct line to those that can make those decisions. To your point earlier, not people that can say no, but that can actually make the decisions to better support the organization, right? To get after readiness, performance, and retention. And it's going to give command teams easy to digest information and act on, tailored to how you prefer it and how you best process information. So, like, I would argue that, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit later, but there have been bits and pieces of this, but there hasn't been something consolidated before, which is, I think, what I've been working on, what my team's been working on, has been so effective. So continuing on with that, right? Objectives and impact. So the objectives in one user-friendly tool, providing a direct line from the lowest ranking airmen to command teams. And then vice versa, providing command teams the ability to quickly listen, understand, and act in the best interest of their teams, which I think gets after, supporting the overarching objective of command teams' ability to measure the health of their force, the most important resource, right? We spend so much money on measuring everything else, the readiness of aircraft and equipment. What if we could measure our people? Like, what if we could measure the health of the force? It's so powerful. And so to me, this is where the impact gets me super excited. Sorry if I seem excited. I love this stuff. I'm passionate about it. The best part is the impact. If I can get health of force metrics, right? Which, oh, by the way, hey, guess what? It already existed. The Navy has been doing this. So a guy named Dr. Richard Linton, with his work for the Department of the Navy, I reached out to a friend of mine, and they had some stuff that was in use. So there is already a research-backed methodology used by the Department of the Navy to do this. And so if used correctly, you basically measure 5 things that get after ultimately, fusing into culture, which turns into 3 things, which I think any leader hopefully wants to get after: increasing readiness, performance, and retention. It's like, if someone comes to you and can give you those, where do I sign? Like, I'm ready, Um, yeah. So, uh, Dakota, if you're good with it, can I share, like, the background story of where this kind of, like, how this morphed? I think there's a really cool story that Tesseract fans would really appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. I would prefer that you share that story for sure.
Okay, cool. So there might be like 10 people in the world up until this podcast that know this full story. So I'm super excited to share it. Okay. So ultimately, right, health of force is not my idea. I'm just a regular dude who cares about people, right? Um, People like Chris Clark, Alex Pagano, Ryan Van Artsdale, and Jen Gerganis, they all understood that if you get culture, the gears of an organization turn the way that they should. Perfect, right? So let's get culture. Okay, so for me, I took it back a couple steps further. How do we get culture? How do you get to a positive culture? And to me, it all started with trust and cooperation and feedback. And that's it. Trust and cooperation, right? If I can get trust and cooperation, I'm good. And so that's where the feedback piece comes in. All right, so now I'm gonna talk a little bit of a story. It's gonna be a little bit long, so go with me on this journey. So about 3 years ago, uh, I posted on LinkedIn about feedback because I care a lot about feedback. And I'm just a major opso at this time, not working the Pentagon, just a major opso with these ideas. And I was a little crazy, and I tagged the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Bass at the time. And I post this idea. I'm like, yeah, I think this is great. Let's see what happens. Just threw it out there. And then, to my surprise, she responded with, "Thanks, sir. I'm on it." And I was like, what? Like, I literally was like, what just happened? I was in shock. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And then a couple of days later, fast forward, and her team emails me and like, hey, Chief Bass wants to meet with you. I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, I need to get some smart people in a room, right? So I call some of the smartest innovators I know. We had a couple internal meetings. Members like Matt Bias, one of the crew chiefs I talked to you about for my first base. Talked to one of the founders of Tesseract, Garrett Smith Hernandez, and Kelsey Smith, who are two of my best friends in the world. And Garrett actually told me, he's like, hey, have you talked to Tesseract about this? About what you're trying to do? It sounds like something they do that's called foundations. And I was like, no, I haven't. But it's funny because it's literally the day prior. Garrett and I had this conversation the day prior to the meeting with Chief Bass, right? So the day prior to this meeting, I get on a call with a then senior airman, Dev Trammell, who was a defender by trade. And he explained this great tool called Foundations. And he was manually doing this Excel product, and it had grown and grown and grown. And so he's doing all this analysis, everything that I talked about earlier, he was doing it with Excel on his own time, right? And it was incredible what he was doing. But the issue was, it was a day prior to meeting the Chief Master of the Air Force. I had already had my plan. I'd already figured out where I want to go, right? Here's the pitch. And so what do? Do I make the choice to full scale pivot and get away from the idea that I had, that I've been talking about for weeks? Or do I go with this brand new thing day prior? I made the wrong choice and stuck with my own idea. Bad idea, right? And so, to be quite honest, and you can ask Dev, you can ask Chief Bass, uh, the first meeting did not go well. It didn't go great, right? I think the concept was good, but there wasn't already something there. And so part of it is using something that already exists, that already is working, right? And so afterwards, I talked more with Dev and the Tesseract team, and it turned out that Foundations really was that answer. And so reached out that, Chief Bass, she was willing to take a second meeting, which was great. And this time, man, it landed, and it landed so well. We physically, Deb did a great job of saying, "Hey, we're gonna do it on cell phones," and she was like, "You can text me the code, right?" So he literally texts the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, a senior airman. There's 4 people on this call: me, Matt Bias, Chief Bass, and myself. And he texts her this QR code, or she gets the number, she takes the survey, and she's blown away by how simple it is, right? And she loved it. And so she loved it so much, she posted about it on the social media accounts for Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, right? Facebook, Instagram, from that call. And so again, it wasn't my idea, but it's an idea that an airman had, that an airman was doing, just regular airmen. But the 3 of us are having these calls with the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. And so because of that, she loved it. The idea ended up getting brought to the air staff, to the Pentagon, and it started growing in velocity. But it really couldn't seem to get to what I would call the starting line, right? Of like trying to get beta testing to scale it. And so recently, okay, that's where it was. Where is it today, right? So here's now full circle moment, man, because Dev and Tesseract was doing this before I got involved. I just helped get the platform to help Tesseract out, right? And now it kind of, I'm looking at this full circle because I just want to show what can be done for an organization for all user experiences, right? And so I think what I did in this case was I helped use an acronym called FOMO, fear of missing out, to nudge leaders to get to the right solution, man. So all right, break. Now I'm in squadron command, right? This happened, took over in June. I won't go into all the details, but I had an immediate need to find a better way to get feedback from my airmen and act on it at the speed of relevance. We had lots of challenges faced by my team regarding feedback. And I was like, I need to be able to collect data and action it for a large enough population. And if I do that, so I'm thinking 2 ways. One, I do that for my squadron. But if I do it well enough, can I move the needle for the Air Force, right? So I asked a buddy of mine from a previous deployment, a guy named Brian Lindsay. I said, "Hey, Brian," I knew he worked in the survey world. And I was like, "Hey, man, can you help me out? Like, I need a research-backed survey tool, easy to use, fast for airmen, and it provides health of force metrics. Can you do that?" And I kid you not, in 1 week, we had this discussion. He built it. We deployed this tool. I had my own dashboard. And within 2 weeks, we collected data, got about 100 responses. The previous year, the QR code that was being used or available in my unit had 5 responses. So we 20x the response rate in 2 weeks, right? And it was not mandatory. It was just posting QR codes around the building. Hey, brief it at roll calls, right? And so I'm going to give 2 examples of like actionable feedback that came out of it, right? As a commander, I tell my team, I have 1 red line, and that's safety, right? You're going to do maintenance by the book, and you're going to treat people with dignity and respect. If you cross that red line, we're going to have a conversation, right? So I asked the question specifically in the survey of, "Hey, have you seen the last 2 weeks someone cross Major Freitag's red line?" And the majority was no, we're good. There were 3 yeses. And they could, if they wanted, they could put comments in. So I got comments. I got notified the minute that it said that. And then 24 hours later, the problem is resolved. Right. So I'm getting that information at a speed of relevance. They're voicing their concern. The problem's fixed the next day. It's not festering. So they're seeing the problems get fixed. They're like, wow, this is great, right? The next one was another question that Brian suggested was, hey, what if I offer the ability for them to schedule a one-on-one meeting with you, the commander, to follow up? I was like, yeah, love it. So he threw that in there. There were 7 people that wanted to do that. So the next week, they submit a response, and within 7 days, they're meeting with the commander. And airmen, NCOs, civilians, and they were shocked. And I'm sitting there with a pen and paper, just writing it down. Hey man, what you got? What you got? And the responses were incredible. And so my team has really started actioning feedback at the speed of relevance. And I'm not solving it at my level necessarily. I'm pushing it to the level it needs to get solved. Maybe it's a flight chief, section chief problem, right? And so it started this feedback culture, and man, it's beautiful to see. It's stuck. And so DEOX, the climate survey that's required for commanders to take, right? Last year we got a 18% response rate, which is not ideal. For I would say like Air Force standard for maintenance units is pretty low though. This time, no incentives, got over 40% response rate, right? Which is pretty high for maintenance units. So ultimately, all that to wrap it up in a bow of saying, getting feedback is turning into more feedback and more feedback and more feedback, and it's building trust and cooperation, which gets at the gear of culture. So I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's awesome. Like, I think you hit on something profound to me personally, right? Trust is something that I hold extremely high, morally, to myself, right? Like, is that is something that's 100% necessary to build like highly effective teams. And if you want to build highly effective teams, you have to have that trust. You have to have the open communication, and the ability to have that open communication. I think what you're doing is creating an environment of that open communication from all levels. So it's essentially taking the vertical hierarchy that we have within the military and flattening it a little bit, right? I, I I'm a huge fan of flat hierarchies personally. I had to read a book for my degree that was called "The Earth is Flat." It's not actually about flat earthers, but it's all about flat hierarchies and how they can be largely effective, in large organizations as well. And it all starts with trust and that communication and like how those complement each other in order to be highly effective, such as taking a DEOX survey from 18 to 40%, right? Or even just like 20xing the amount of responses that you get. That's something that's truly awesome in every definition of the word. And I personally commend you for, going out on a limb and trying something and then um iterating on it to be able to make it something better. That's truly awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, and just two notes about that, right? Like, um, the feedback piece, like this is not supposed to replace face-to-face feedback. That is so critical. I'm not trying to get rid of flight chiefs getting feedback, right? That's not the case. It's just there are uh, airmen. Most airmen today have only known life with this device in their hand, and so sometimes they're more comfortable using it, right? So it's just putting the tool in their hand they're more comfortable with. So it's a combination of that, right? Of just I'm not trying to replace face-to-face feedback. I'm not trying to replace my leaders from being able to do that feedback. In fact, a lot of times they didn't know these were problems. And so it encourages them to get out in their formations and get this information prior to the airman feeling like I need to just send it to the commander, right? Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a cultural shift that you're creating. It's really awesome. Um yeah, so I know you hit on ROI a little bit earlier as well. Um and then you already hit yeah, you basically hit on all of the questions in particular. Is there is there anything else that you'd like to add? Um about like your experience, how working with Tesseract has gone, how you see innovation within the Air Force, anything like that?
Yeah, yeah, if you don't mind. And really there's kind of two more things I want to talk about, if that's okay. One, it's how to deal with challenges and roadblocks, because quite frankly, in this scenario, I didn't face many. Uh, I do want to provide a couple nuggets for the innovators out there, and then one last plug on specifically the the Health of Force initiative, specifically where it lies today, because we're actually in need of help, and it's a little bit of a recruiting thing, if that's all right. So the main thing,
Yeah.
is that cool if we go that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Okay, so for innovators, I talked about frozen middle. I want to talk about this, and you mentioned it earlier about people saying no who maybe aren't able to say no, right? Uh, I believe that you can fall the frozen middle through effective communication, specifically storytelling. Slides are okay, right? But you have to communicate a story to a decision maker of why they want to take action that you want them to take. So it's about connection and not perfection, right? So here's an example that I really want to hit on. If you ask yourself about the decision maker who can move the idea forward or not, if you make them the hero of the innovation story, you won't lose. Again, you got to focus on connection, not perfection. You spend all this time with the slides and formatting and all this, make sure they have a water bottle at their seat. Like, that's cool. But if you focus on the connection piece versus perfection, you're going to succeed. For instance, right? Let's pretend the decision maker for your innovation thing is a Star Wars fan. Compare them to Luke Skywalker using the Force to guide the munitions into the porthole onto the target to blow up the Death Star, right? That's going to resonate with them. Or say they're a sports fan. Make them feel like Pat Mahomes on the Kansas City Chiefs throwing a touchdown to win the Super Bowl, right? Most leaders want to help. They want to help. And so if you make them feel like taking action is the only appropriate choice, you're going to win, right? You're going to win. And if you don't, you're going to learn. And so the goal, you know, the goal of any communication when you are pushing specifically innovation has three parts. And think about this before you talk to decision makers. What do we want them to know? How do we want them to feel? And ultimately, what do we need them to do? And so you need to take your communication strategy and push it toward those things.
Yeah, and I think that's one specific thing that is interesting, right? Is like I'm seeing it more and more, specifically with the storytelling, right? Is how can I make this individual feel the pain that these airmen that are pushing forward with this initiative feel, right? Like how can I set that scene, right? Of um like just making them understand those things, right? Like if that I always give an example of like when I joined the Air Force, right? Like I went to tech school. I graduated as an aircraft fuel systems mechanic. I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to Fairchild. I'm going to work on AC-135. I'm going to do some cool stuff. And I show up, and the very first thing that I did for the first 6 months of my career was sweep and mop hangar floors because that was the value that I provided to my organization. And like you see senior like people's faces drops, and it's like, but that's why we continue to innovate is because we want to alleviate that pain. What would it look like to get an industrial Roomba? And then that individual can focus on the core competency of why they joined the Air Force, right? Like it brings it to a super negative, but then it's how can we bring it back out to the positive, right? And making those individuals feel that pain, I think, is an essential part of that storytelling in particular. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Couldn't agree more, man. And Dakota, the other piece that I kind of want to hit on is like the, the making them feel that, right? So like something that I've been talking about, and the way I visualize this, and to just to contextualize this for commanders, this piece is specifically for leaders in the field, right? Commanders, SELs, first sergeants. Okay, put yourself in your car. What you did this morning, what you're maybe doing right now. You're driving to work, right? Hands on the wheel. You start your car, you look at your dashboard. On your dashboard, you have things like fuel level, general awareness stuff, right? Fuel level, tire pressure, blinkers, the speed. Some cars now have directional heading and warnings, check engine light, low fuel, lane departure warnings, right? All of these things designed to make sure the vehicle is healthy. Aircraft, same thing, very similar sensors, right? Why don't we have a dashboard for our organizations giving us the health of the most important asset, right? Kind of tying in earlier, like I need a dashboard of this. And so this is what Foundations is doing, and what the Air Force is considering rolling out with, right? I say considering, I got this free trial, and here's the good news is, as the command teams, you can take this tool and you can slice and dice data how you need to. So you can customize it to how you prefer for your unit with your logos on it. And if you want to just look at airman problems or senior airman problems or NCO, you can slice it however you want, which is amazing. You want AI to do word cloud stuff? Cool. You want to look at just the comments? Cool. You want net promoter score because that's industry standard? Yep, got that. So all of these tools are completely customizable, which is amazing. And so I outbriefed flight leadership using the tools from this platform, and they loved it, right? So that was absolutely incredible. And so, Dakota, like here is my big ask for anyone that is watching this podcast or tuning in on the Fireside chat. Like, please, take nothing away. Take this. One, thank you. Thank you for like Tesseract. I'm a huge fan of you guys and everything that you do and everything that it stands for. If you're listening to this call and you have ideas, hit them up, man. They are phenomenal. I've been a believer since it was an idea on a piece of paper between two friends. So huge thank you to having me do this. And then most importantly, for commanders, SELs, first sergeants, people that care about their airmen. If you're listening to this and you care about your airmen and you are interested, guess what? I just got word that you can start this tomorrow. So if you're a commander in the field and you want this dashboard custom built for you, literally, I talked about the timeline. For me, I was like the first one that got to do the test case, right? So it took me literally on a Monday, I pitched what I needed. On Friday, I deployed the software. I can't say how long that's going to be for you, but right now, I need people that care. So if there are commanders from any level, I don't care, flight, squadron, group, wing, shoot me an email, give me a call. You have the ability to get this dashboard and get health of force metrics for your unit. And so if we can do this, like I did it I got about 100 responses, right? 1/5 of my squadron. What happens if we can get 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 command teams? The Air Force is going to get this data and see this, and now we can all learn from each other. We can collaborate and build trust that, like, look, this is working, right? So all that to say, if you have any interest at all, reach out to me. I'm the only Sean Freitag in the global, sean.freitag.1 at usif.mil. Find me on LinkedIn. I told you earlier how I use that. I'm a bald guy in a camo uniform. I don't have the headphones on in my LinkedIn picture, but I'm always looking to collaborate with airmen from all levels and to help. So, just really wanted to say thank you so much for bringing me on this forum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a perfect ending to this amazing Fireside chat, amazing podcast. And I want to say thank you, sir, for hopping on. I think this was a really awesome, eye-opening experience for me, right? Like I said earlier, I came into it leaving my bias out of it, so I didn't know what health or the Health of Force initiative was. So now I do. I'm excited to be more educated on it and then try to go out and spread the word some more. So thank you again very much. And we'll talk to you soon.